Cinema Classics is brought to you by the Gateway Film Center, 1550 North High Street, Columbus, Ohio. Further details and showtimes online at gatewayfilmcenter.org.
The award-winning Cinema Classics is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to the shows and read reviews online at WCBE.org. I'm Johnny DiLoretto.
And I'm Sommer Sterud.
And this is Cinema Classics. And we got a real Cinema Classic to talk about today. Opening at the Gateway Film Center this week is a 35mm print of Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
Which, as you know, is like very near and dear to me.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's pretty great, right? So, I don't know, when's the last time you saw it all the way, or prior to this recent viewing, when did you see it before?
Oh man, I saw it like in graduate school, so.
Yeah. And what is your, what are your impressions of that movie all these years later? Is it still relevant? People
Oh
like...
my gosh. Yeah, I definitely think it's relevant. This is, you know, right on the heels of the end of the Vietnam War, right? And I think there can be a lot tied to the notion of male identity.
Yeah.
You know, there was a bit of an identity crisis going on after that, and I think you could say, you could make this a similar connection.
Right. So though they don't go into it very much, Scorsese and Paul Schrader, the guy that wrote it, they don't go into Travis being a Vietnam vet.
Yeah,
they mention it very
really
quickly
subtle.
that he's back, he's looking for a job, but you can tell this guy is broken.
Yeah.
He is kind of demolished emotionally and psychologically.
Yeah, we talk about this in one of my classes, and we had a look at Rambo, and then we have a look at First Blood.
Yeah.
And then Taxi Driver, and we talk about the differences, and I asked them if, you know, because this was what, 76?
Yeah.
And then Rambo was 82.
The first one I think is 80.
Okay.
Isn't
First Blood, I thought it was 82.
Maybe
but
it's 82.
anyway, even
You're
just
right.
that little bit of time, I like that.
I'm sure you're right.
Say that again.
Now, if you were John, I'd say I'd be in serious doubt.
I'm going to look that up later. But, you know, I asked the question of, you know, do you think time plays a part in that, you know, the way they're dealing with post-traumatic stress or whatever?
Well, yeah, fresh out of that war, that character cannot articulate what's wrong with him.
Right.
Or why he's so broken, or why he's so in need of connection. Now, just 6 years later, or however many years later that is, when First Blood comes out, Stallone's character articulates it at the very end, exactly why
I've been spit on. All that.
He feels this way. And it's interesting that, you know, it's arguable. I'd be curious to know if your students thought of Travis Bickle as heroic.
Well, okay, so we don't have time to watch the whole film in class, so I show them clips. I try to show, like, the progression of Travis's character, and we get the first scene where we see he wants to help Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
And he's super sweet, you know. And then we see him kind of start to lose it, like buying the guns and practicing, and then his head shaved, and then I show them the clip of him just going nuts, right?
Right.
And they're like, oh my God, this guy, he's trying to do it for the good of Iris, but he's kind of a maniac, you know? But then when I show them the clips of the father writing, you know, it's the father's voice and the letters, and they do see him as a hero, but you see they're kind of conflicted about it, you know?
See, that's interesting to me, because he's clearly a hero to me.
Yeah.
But it's only because, you know, we talked about this, like, there are two things happening in this movie. One is I like to start from the premise that Travis is sort of like a duckling. Like, he's imprinting on everything he sees. And, of course, what he sees is 1976 New York City, and it ain't pretty.
Yeah.
He's seeing the dregs of humanity every day. They're in the back seat of his cab.
Right.
There's violence, there's sex, there's crime, there's prostitution, and he's witness to all of it. And I think it's flooding his brain and feeding who he is and his psyche.
Right.
And so there's these two things, there's two prominent women in the movie, right? There's Sybil Shepherd, who is this romantic ideal that he's pursuing. but she is more preoccupied with working for this political campaign.
Right.
And then there's the Jodie Foster character, who's this prostitute, and Harvey Keitel is the pimp. So he sees these two women being exploited, one of whom rejects him. Romantically, right? And that sends him spiraling down this path of
he focuses
violence.
Only on the paternal instinct of wanting to help Jodie Foster.
Yeah, but I think there's these two violent urges. One is to get back at the Sybil Shepherd character, Betsy, by assassinating Palantine, right? And then there's the urge to, which is wrong, that's the,
well,
that would be bad.
I think that's why some people have a hard time totally calling him a hero.
Right.
Because the first attempt at violence was on a kind of an innocent guy.
Right. He's just trying to assassinate this guy.
Yeah.
But then, because that is foiled, and he goes off and murders all these pimps and Johns, not John DeSando, that act is deemed heroic.
Right.
And had he successfully carried out the assassination, there would be no doubt that Travis is a monster.
Yeah, I think you've said this before. He would go down in history as
an assassin.
Right. And now
instead
he's
of going down
as a hero. Right. But what's interesting to me is the fact that and you're right, but I think this is what I noticed years later watching it. He's sort of erased, and I would point to the war doing that, right? He's erased, and he doesn't understand, like the guy when they sit down at the diner and the guys are like, how's it hanging? And he's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, he's got a blank expression,
Yeah.
That, I think, is probably the most brilliant aspect of De Niro's performance. We can't talk about this movie without talking. This is one of the most legendary performances of all time. Yeah. Everybody points to the you talking to me business. Right. But where he is really sort of powerful for me are in those moments where you see how disconnected he is from language and just everyday interaction. When that moment where the guy asks him how's it hanging, or when Sybil Shepherd makes a joke and he just kind of goes blank, he can't get it. And it's sort of tragic to me. I think he's a very I love this character. I think he's a really beautiful, sweet, romantic character that is a tragic figure.
Yeah, when he takes her to the movie, the adult movie, and he doesn't get that it's porn, and she's like, what are you, I mean, it's very artsy porn, I mean, I don't give him that, it's like French or whatever, and he's like, what, a lot of couples, it's just heartbreaking. Yeah,
he can't see that is not first date material.
What is interesting, you mentioned the famous, like, you talking to me, well, showing that scene to my students who are 18, 19, they all know it. In fact, they were laughing. They were laughing at it. It was hard for them not to laugh. And yet they hadn't seen the film. They had no context. So once they saw what they were laughing at, that was really interesting, I thought. Yeah.
And it's always interesting to see those sort of iconic moments, or share them with younger moviegoers who only have these sort of cultural kind of ideas about what that stuff is. But, everybody looks again at that scene and remembers it, or at least pop culturally we think of it as this tough guy scene. Where Robert De Niro is really, he's really awesome, and he's kind of, you're talking to me, and he's not. He's sort of in his soft voice, kind of like pretending. He's having these sort of like imaginary conflicts with people, and he has like almost a conversation. And it's a lot different, I think, than people would expect, and also I think reflects the sort of fragility and the complexity of that
I
character.
think it shows how isolated he is. When these imaginary conversations and he's kind of pretending. But what about, I wanted to ask you about the end. That last scene. That I totally forgot was the last scene. Like I think of the last scene as the images.
The letter.
The letter. The letter from Iris's father thanking him and.
Right, so there's that bloodbath that happens in the brothel, and then you get that sort of that coda, the letter from Iris's parents thanking him and calling him a hero, and then there's this last little bit where Travis is supposedly healed and he's driving his cab again, and he picks Sybil Shepherd up. Is that what you're talking about?
His hair's grown back.
His hair's grown back. He's looking good. He's smiling.
Yeah.
He sees Betsy, and you think for a second, oh, this is going to set him off.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. He's very kind to her.
Yeah.
Gives her her ride.
For free.
Right. I heard about you in the papers, and how much do I owe you? And he puts the...
And I love it. He's like, oh, it was nothing. Like,
yeah.
I just got a little...
And then he drives off, and the music kind of comes up, and the credits start to roll, and then there's this little bit of a nervous, jerky motion in the rearview mirror. And there's a little kind of tweak to the violin score at that point. And I think right then we realized that this guy is not healed.
Yeah, and he'll never be.
Yeah, and he could go off at any time. You were talking about the hero myth and the healing myth, and this is something that you talk to with your students about, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about that particular moment at the ending is that it shows maybe or puts into question that Travis is neither healed nor a hero.
Right. Well, I was saying this to you before.
Yeah.
Those two myths are at play in this film. He clearly needs healed. That's not successful in the end. And but if you were to track that hero myth, that I think it's Joseph Campbell, kind of the hero's journey in like 10 steps or something. That it's like almost perfect, and he does get the goal of saving the girl.
Yeah.
But he doesn't save himself, and so those two are kind of going on at the same time. They're these parallel agendas.
Right.
Yeah.
And not only that, I mean, I guess you could say that character is probably really, in broad terms, representative of America coming out of that post-war, post-Vietnam War moment.
Yeah.
And anyway, the movie is showing at the Gateway Film Center in 35mm all week. Really, everybody should see this one time. It's probably one of the most important movies of the 70s.
It's great.
So,
can't wait.
You want to go get a pizza?
Yes, a slice of cheese.
Okay, slice of milk.
Do you want to say that it's opening March 4th? Or it would be tomorrow from this show?
Yeah. Okay. So the movie is Taxi Driver. It's opening tomorrow, and 35mm at the Gateway Film Center. Don't miss it. It's a pretty extraordinary experience to see it the way Scorsese intended.